Hello, I'm Reverend Dr. Sharup Baur. I'm a professor of theology at Bishop's College, Kolkata, India, and also the presbyter in charge of St. Andrew's Church under the Diocese of Calcutta, CNI. And it's been my privilege and honor to share a series of lectures on the Indian Christian Theology, which definitely I teach my students back in India at Bishop's College. And I hope these series of lectures would be helpful and insightful for all those who would be looking forward to it. Thank you very much. So the third lecture in this series is on feminist theology and focusing on India. Of course, before we go into the particularly Indian concerns in feminist theology, let us take a brief overview of the history of the development of feminist theology. Feminist theology is a global movement working towards the emancipation of women. It is basically a liberation movement which has various shades to it. The goal is to achieve equality for women in modern society, including their status, value, and attitudes. The rise of women's liberation movement in the 19th, 20th century helped to create a critical consciousness. This called for a new approach to investigate whether the past approaches of the church or theology have been discriminative. Most often, it included a new type of interpretive approach or hermeneutics of the Bible or the text to point out the drawbacks of the Christian tradition or the church towards women. Feminism has come into conflict with some aspects of Christianity since religions seem to treat women's status as secondary, both in terms of roles that are assigned to them in the church and also their relationship with God and the understanding of God's image. Now, having this background in mind, let us look at feminist theology historically. Feminist theology addresses a number of issues within Christianity, church, and the wider society, namely patriarchy, the domination of males in the society, androcentrism, male-centeredness, misogyny, those who dislike women, sexism, prejudice, and stereotyping against women. Among the feminist works, Simone de Beauvoir's The Second Sex in 1945 deals with some of the above issues, especially a reworking of the image of God from the feminist viewpoints have been seen in feminist literature. The exclusive notion that God is male and the maleness of God as a norm in our theology and life have been challenged by writers such as Mary Dalit in Beyond God the Father, 1973, and Daphne Hampson in Theology and Feminism in 1990s. Some common themes emerge in feminist theology. Feminist theology attacks the persistent use of male pronouns for God within the Christian tradition. In her Sexism and God Talk, Rosemary Radford Ruther suggests the term goddess with a slash in between that could be a politically correct designation for God instead of God as a male only. One of the most addressed themes in feminist theology is that of the person of Christ. Rosemary Ruther in Sexism and God Talk points out that Christology has much grounding for sexism in Christianity. Here she talks about patriarchalization of Christology and suggests alternative models. Now we come to feminist biblical interpretation. Feminist theologies have also tried to develop their theologies basing on particular approaches to biblical interpretation. The feminist biblical interpretations would point out the lack of acknowledgement of the roles of women in the biblical narrative. These theologies would also uncover the sexist and violent stories and approaches commonly found in the Bible. Positively, they look forward to highlighting the role of women in biblical narratives and in the life of Christ too. In recent years, feminist theology has become varied and diverse, spreading to continents other than Europe and America. Feminist theologies have been attempted in Asia and African contexts as well. Now we talk a little bit about Asian feminism and womanist theology. Asian feminism, as Kwok Pui Lan, a theologian from Hong Kong, puts it, is not only a form of theological reflection, but also a political movement to transform the church and society so that women's freedom and dignity will be fully recognized. There is another term used for feminist movements among Black African American women, diaspora, and in other Western nations, which is known as womanist theology. The African origin women feel that their concerns are not adequately expressed through the white European American movement, simply because the contexts and concerns are hugely different. Womanist theology is a reaction to male domination in Black theology and racial prejudice in feminist theology. Alice Walker coined the term womanist, which points to the movement committed to survival and wholeness of entire people, both male and female. Now we concentrate on Indian feminism. Indian feminism, as argued by Kamala Bhasin and Said Khan, is a consciousness of patriarchal control over women's labor, fertility, and sexuality, which raises important issues of violence, caste, and class. Indian feminist theology emerged in the 1970s, and it works for liberation at the personal, social, political, and other levels. But efforts at emancipation of women began earlier. So Pandita Ramabai Saraswati devoted her life in the 19th century to empowering women and promoting gender equality in British-ruled India, a society where patriarchy was deeply entrenched. Though Ramabai was born into a Hindu Brahmin family in the state of Karnataka, she converted to Christianity in her 20s after a famine took the life of her husband and spurred a crisis of faith. Herself a widow, Ramabai knew the plight of women who had lost their husbands, and in 1889 she founded the Mukti Mission as a refuge for destitute women, children, and disabled persons. Mukti means liberation. The mission provided shelter, education, and vocational training for women and gave them tools they needed to lead independent and fulfilling lives. In India, the common understanding is that women suffer from womb to the tomb. In aspects of education, societal life, economics, politics, and religion, women are the least considered. Aruna Jnanadasan, an Indian feminist theologian, initiated a way to reread the Bible from a liberative perspective for women. Indian feminist theologians, while reconstructing the doctrine of God, uses various images of God. Aruna uses the image of Shakti or power to articulate the doctrine of God. Shakti in Indian terms relates to power in the feminine tradition. Indian womanist or feminist Christologies also have been attempted at various other levels. Monica Jyotsna Melanthan works on the human and divine nature of Christ, linking them with the redemptive work of Christ, which includes both men and, of course, women. Monica points out that in the Christian tradition, Jesus' maleness is particularized instead of focusing on the resurrected Jesus. In the resurrected Christ, divisions of gender and divinity are overcome. Evangeline Anderson Rajkumar proposes body Christology in her paper entitled Politicizing the Body, a Feminist Christology, which stands in direct opposition to casteist ideology of differentiation and discrimination rooted in gender. In feminist theologies in Asia and Africa, and particularly in India, there are other dimensions which can be briefly noted. In the Indian context, the possibility and the need of doing a Dalit feminist theology, taking into consideration the particular concerns of Dalit women who are more oppressed than their counterparts in higher castes, have to be highlighted. Added to this is the need for a tribal feminist theology, highlighting the particular struggles or discrimination, displacement, and poverty the women face in these contexts. In conclusion, we have to say that feminist theology, as it started, and especially in India, it takes on multiple intersectional possibilities, taking into consideration caste, poverty, class, and different other parameters. We continue to do feminist theology, taking into considerations all these parameters in question. Thank you.